chaos going in the world right now.
Yeah, it's hard to say where it's headed, but I don't think it's going to go away. I think war is here to stay. For where it's going to expand is probably the better question. Hard to say. Again, Middle East is usually where they like to pick to center war around.
Right.
It's just usually been the place, and Israel's usually who they use to start those wars. So, I mean, it's really hard to say how bad it's going to get, but if you were asking me if this is the beginning of World War III, I would say very likely.
That's scary.
The reason I say that is because the timing of it is interesting, because it's also around the time where our financial system is under severe pressure. We're seeing interest rates at over 40-year highs. We're seeing the 10-year Treasury at levels we haven't seen since 2006. It's currently at 5%. Just 3 years ago, that rate was 0.6%. So the U.S. Treasury rate has gone up 800% in just under 3 years, which has never been seen before. So we're in uncharted territory. And usually when you go through a big financial upheaval or a reset, the world takes you to war, or the powers that be take you to war. So seeing war escalate like this does make me nervous that they may be closer to a financial reset than most people think. So, I mean, depending on how big this war gets and how long it goes, I do think it does signal something much larger than just, I don't want to downplay the war. Obviously, people are dying, and it's very sad to see that they're going through these, but I think there's a lot of reasons that they go to war, and it's not for the reasons that people think. It's not religious reasons. It's not about land. It's about money and power and distraction. So I think those are the main reasons they do this. I think a lot of money is generated through these wars. The banks make a lot of money by lending to the governments. I think we just announced today Biden's looking for $110 billion just for the war.
So where does he get it? Where is he going to get it?
Well, that's funny because you had Janet Yellen come out just a couple days ago stating that we can afford 2 wars. The U.S. can afford 2 wars. Nothing could be further from the truth. The U.S. can't afford 1 war, not to mention 2 wars. The U.S. is the most indebted country in the world. We have a $33 trillion debt. Or the U.S. has a $33 trillion debt, and it is escalating at a very rapid pace. And now that debt has to be paid at higher interest rates. So that debt is exploding at this point. It's going to continue to go up at an exponential rate. Mm-hmm. So again, the war is created for many reasons.
For sure. And I think, like we were discussing this earlier, I think people are falling for the divide. I mean, if you look...
Another big reason they do the war, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all you have to do is look at social media right now, and you're going to see you're either pro-Israel or you're pro-Palestine.
Right. There's a lot of emotions because people belong there, right?
And I totally, for sure.
Exactly. I totally understand that. But we have to realize, too, and your point there, and we'll get into this. This is insane. But if you look at the past, the U.S. lied about Iraq. They lied about Syria. They lied about Libya. They lied about Kuwait.
Every single war that's ever been.
They lied about Ukraine. They lied about Afghanistan. Now they're going to be telling the truth about Israel and Gaza.
Of course. So, exactly.
So again, I feel like, obviously we can't trust the mainstream media. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this podcast. That's why there's alternative news. Just to get, people are dying for the truth, and it's kind of sad that's happening right now. And you brought up a great point. So, I don't think this will be resolved until we get in the streets and come together and protest against the elites. Right. I think that's when you'll see a change. Right now, when I see Ukraine, Russia, people divided, Israel, Gaza, I don't think anything's going to be resolved. It seems like we're just, going in circles again.
And there is rumor of civil wars may breaking out in Israel.
So before this war started, there was they were on the brink of a civil war, Israel.
Right. Before the war,
Yeah, so...
Maybe that's another reason. I mean,
there's
exactly. So many, there's never just 1 or 2 reasons they go into these wars. There's a multitude of reasons that they do this. And it's never for the reasons that you think. It's not about religion. Yeah. It's not about land. It's about, if the powers that be want to take a country to war, they will. They can create a war very easily. It's very easy to just bomb any country they choose at any time. So, I mean, it's not usually for the right reasons, and it's usually for, selfish reasons by these elites that run the world, and they're not good reasons for us.
Right. So, the bankers want war because they can lend out money and charge interest to all these governments on both sides, right?
Yep.
And then you got defense contractors that want war, obviously,
Big
and
money.
they're pushing all these political puppets, right? So,
and the powers that be, they own these defense companies.
Yeah, exactly, right? So they're making money on top of that as well.
They're making money with the banking, on the lending. They're allowing more government printing, so they're allowing us to print money, which at that point, when they print it, you don't really know what they do with it. So if they need it to cover the banks, because the banks we may be close to a credit freeze. I think we are. So maybe the banks need money right now. They don't
talk about credit freeze. What's that mean? No more credit out to nobody?
Well, and also, that's happening already. I mean, the lending is getting more difficult.
Right.
But when I say credit freeze, I mean the banks run dry on money and they can't operate anymore.
Ooh, that's very doom and gloom.
Yeah, and you're already seen 3 to 4 banks in the U.S. go down this year.
Yeah.
Big banks, and I think that trend will continue because since then, what has happened to interest rates? They've actually continued to go up. So all that does is cause more pressure on the banks. You got to understand the banks. There's a couple of things, but the banks, one of the biggest things they own are treasury bonds. And the U.S. treasury bond market is absolutely getting destroyed right now because as interest rates go up, the bond values go down. So all of these assets that the banks have been buying for years at low interest rates are now almost deemed worthless because the rates are so high right now. Wow. So those bonds they bought that were paying 0.6% or 1% are now paying 5%. So those bonds that they bought at 1% and they have to sell those, who's going to want those bonds? Mm-hmm, if they can go out and buy their own at 5%. So those are going to have to be discounted at a very, very aggressive rate. And that is the danger of the banking system, is the assets they own are very risky and they are not performing well. They also own stocks. How are stocks doing? Not well.
Right.
Do they own real estate? Yes. How are those doing? Not well. Are they lending money? Yes. Is that gone down? Yes, big time. People are not borrowing. People are not depositing funds into the banks.
So where are you going to put, if you have money, obviously, wealthy people, where are wealthy people putting their money? They're putting them in bonds right now, but they're
that's traditionally where they have put money, but I think you're starting to see that reversal. You're starting to see people sell their bonds because bonds have been getting absolutely crushed.
Right.
It's been one of the worst performing assets.
So what's the alternative?
Well, your other option is do you buy stocks? But if bonds go down, the knee-jerk reaction is for stocks to go down with it. So the bond market leads all other financial asset markets.
Right.
So if bonds go down, stocks will go down as well. Real estate will go down as well.
Right.
So where does that leave people? And they're not trusting the banks, right? So you have all of these things happening. So now somebody has to decide, especially wealthy people, where do I put my money? I don't trust the banks. Bonds are getting crushed. Stocks don't have a lot of upside. Real estate is under a lot of pressure. Where do I put my wealth? And historically where that has been is gold and silver. When all else fails and there's risk in the markets and people are nervous and fearful, they rush into precious metals. That process has begun, but we're at the really, really early stages of that. I mean, I think that trend will continue for years to come. And I think as this war continues, as the interest rates continue to rise, as the economy continues to slow, as stocks continue to come down, as the bond market continues to be under pressure, people are they're gonna move their money. It's just, they have to. They're not just gonna let their portfolio go down 70, 80, 90%. They're gonna have to make moves. And that move will likely be precious metals, because where else are you gonna put your money? I mean,
I think there's so much. I know the show is based on it, but there's so much upside now with precious metals.
It's insane. It's insane, and especially on silver. I mean, again, silver is 60% less than its price from 1980. Every other asset class in the world is up multiple times.
Right.
Stocks are up over 15 times. Bonds are up over 15 times. Everything is up. Stocks and real estate are up over 15 times. since 1980, but somehow silver is down 60% and gold is only up 150%. So this is just a cycle. We were in a cycle. The bond market has popped. Interest rates are going up, but the bond market is collapsing. That is the scariest thing for our entire financial system. Same with stocks. We're in a 14-year bull market. Since 2008, stocks have been going up.
Right. Yeah.
Well, they have to come down. Nothing goes up forever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there's going to be a correction. People are going to get nervous, and they will get freaked out, and they will panic, and they'll get out of the stock market. They'll get out of the bond market.
Right.
Then they're going to be sitting on all this money and sitting in the banks, which a lot of people don't trust right now, especially if some banks start to fail later this year, which I think is very likely to happen as these interest rates continue to go higher. I think you're going to continue to see more bank failures. So people are going to be really nervous. And when that happens, I think gold and silver will be the winner. And you'll see the beginning of the biggest commodity bull market that we've seen in quite some time, if not ever. And that'll be an exciting time for people invested in commodities and precious metals. But for people who are sitting on traditional assets like stocks and bonds and real estate, they're going to go through a tough period. I mean, it's not going to be making new highs every year like we've seen over the past 14 years. That is in the past, and you need to look at where the opportunities exist today. And I don't see how you can debate the fact that it's not going to be commodities that win in this environment. Inflation is not going away. It's just not. The money printing that is happening for these wars is astronomical, which is going to cause major inflation.
And devalue the dollar even more.
Of course. But the scary part is this 10-year treasury, because they cannot let the interest rate of the 10-year treasury continue to run rampant. Right now, we're at levels that we haven't seen since 2006. Okay, we were at near 0%, 1% for the last decade. Now, all of a sudden, we're up to 5%. Okay, so we're at 16, 17-year highs. So what is going to have to happen for them? The central banks are going to have to bring that rate down of the treasury. So that yield has to come down. The only way they can bring that down is by buying bonds. So the Fed's going to have to get into the markets again, print more money, and buy these government bonds, because the rest of the world is selling them. Brazil's selling them. China's selling them. Russia's selling them.
We've seen that graph. That was insane.
China sold like over 20% of their treasuries in the last 12 months or something crazy like that.
Wow, that's insane.
That's a big number, because China owns the most amount of the U.S. treasuries in the world. So once they start selling, this is a scary, scary time. This is what eventually will collapse the U.S. dollar and will collapse the entire global economy once this bond market fully collapses. And I think we're at the beginning stages of that now. And I think these next couple of years, you're going to see some major fireworks in the financial markets.
This chaos, this instability, it's a no-brainer to buy gold and silver right now. It's a no-brainer. And then it's your only, if you fear the CBDCs coming, your only defense is precious metals.
And it's the least risky. I mean, we haven't had that big bull market in metals in quite some time. I mean, the last huge one was in the 70s, where silver went up 41 times, gold went up 25 times. We're going to see something very similar to that in this decade. You're going to see the price of precious metals absolutely explode. You got to understand, right now, only 0.5% of people are invested in precious metals. Not just physical, but and stocks. So combination of all precious metal investment possibilities, only 0.5% of all assets are invested in precious metals. That's going to change. Okay, in 1980, it got all the way to 5%. So if that 0.5% goes to 5%, that's a tenfold increase in the amount of people owning precious metals. That is going to drive the price of gold and silver to go up at a minimum 10 times, at a minimum.
Yeah.
But I think you're going to see a bigger percentage of the population owning precious metals than we saw in 1980. Because this collapse that we're about to see is going to make 1980 look like a walk in the park. This is going to be much more catastrophic because the debt is so much greater than it was then. It's just people are up to here in debt. Credit card debt is at all-time highs. People are under pressure. The economy's slowing. Things are getting more expensive. I mean, I really don't see much upside in the economy or in traditional
financial. And people are losing faith in their government. So if you don't trust your government, you're going to be in precious metals. You're going to have gold and silver because that's an asset that's untouchable.
And that's usually what we see.
Yeah.
The people who are currently buying gold and silver, that small percentage of people, it's usually the people who are really awake and paying attention to what's happening in the world.
Right.
From a geopolitical standpoint, from an economic standpoint, they know the history of money. They know gold and silver are real money, and everything else is just fiat, and it eventually goes to zero. So there is a lot of knowledgeable people, but the problem is 99% of the population has no idea the benefits of owning gold and silver. So that's why we do this podcast. We're trying to get the word out there to explain to them why they need to own precious metals. I mean,
or at least diversify your portfolio. Like, you have to have precious metals in your portfolio,
especially in today's environment. I mean, yeah, you could get away with it not owning metals when you're going through a stock market bull market, or like bonds have performed amazing for 40 years. Those were great investments. Okay, but now it's different. Okay, that bull market in bonds is over. That bull market in stocks is over. So where's the next bull market going to be? It's pretty obvious it's going to be commodities, because we haven't seen a commodity bull market in quite some time. And now with inflation at 40-year highs, to me it seems very inevitable that the price of all things are going to skyrocket over the coming years as the government and the central banks continue to print, especially when they lower interest rates at some point. When they finally lower interest rates, the dollar,
which they'll have to
at some point, but they'll probably need some type of event to occur prior to that. I don't know what that event might be.
Oh, World War III.
that might be part of it. I mean, that's the scariest part of this all, because this could escalate really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And the people that I follow online, who I think are very knowledgeable and historians, I mean, they're all saying that this is World War III is going to happen, and Russia and the United States are going to have a war with one another. Yeah. And if that were to happen, I mean,
that's terrifying. And it's sad that, you know, I just seen a stat too that President Donald Trump was the only president in history that did not start a war or did not go to war.
I knew that.
For his term. He's the only president. I think people are a lot in regret. Right now, Trump, that's why he's doing great in the polls. And people are, I know we don't have much faith in politicians. We agree on that. We believe they're all, you know, it's just, how many times can you, be lied to and, but he is the only one that's never gone to war. And the people that, that are in power now, they said that Trump would crash the economy and take us to World War III. And that's happening without him. And I think that's why he's surging in the polls. I think people now are like regretting. And you're seeing that. You're seeing like people come out in public and that were bashing Trump. Now they're flipping. Now they're like...
Unfortunately, I think it's just going to be too late.
Yeah.
Even if he were to get in, I think by then this whole thing will have escalated to a much bigger war than what we're seeing today. And I think... if I had to bet on it, if there will even be an election or not next year, at the end of next year, I'm going to say no.
There's not.
I don't see how that's going to happen.
I think because
they don't want it to happen. Number one, and I think the war will be at a much higher level. I think you're going to see shutdowns, lockdowns. I think the world is going to be a completely different world come this time next year.
I truly believe, from what I've read and just doing a little research here and there, and even Tucker Carlson has said it, but I really don't think there's going to be an election November 2024. I think they're going to invoke some War Measures Act, like they can, and they can somehow, stall it or pause it so they can carry on this agenda. There is no way they're going to let someone like, if a guy like Donald Trump or a guy like RFK Jr. come in there and try to make peace.
There's no chance.
There's no money in peace.
There is a war going on.
There's no money in peace.
They're not going to let Trump come in and just stop that war. It's just not going to happen.
It's just not happening.
I mean, whatever agenda they want to happen, they're going to make happen.
Right.
If that's delaying an election, that is very easy for them to do, and they will do that. So they're going to...
Or they'll just rig the election again.
Well, that's going to happen no matter what. But
I think it's this one.
You can't rig it for the Democrats to win. I don't see how that can happen this time around. I just don't see it being possible unless they get like Kim Kardashian or somebody like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Taylor Swift.
Michelle Obama. There's a lot of rumors of Michelle Obama, right?
I mean, I don't think it really matters.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody will want to be voting for Democrats come the next election based off of what the U.S. is going to be going through over the next 12 months. I mean,
I think people are terrified because in war times now that you're getting into all this conflict, you want a strong president, and people are like looking at Biden like, this guy's gonna. I don't know. Oh God, this guy can't even.
It's embarrassing. It's sad to watch. It's sad to watch. And Trudeau's no better. I mean, but my point is, people put too much energy and effort into hating these individuals,
right?
And I would just keep reminding people that it's not their choice. These are just puppets. Politicians are just following orders. They're not making decisions at all. They cannot accomplish the goals they want to accomplish without a central bank. Without the central bank, the power moves from these criminals, these psychopaths, and back into the hands of the people. So this is why I never really became a huge fan of Trump. It's because he didn't fight against the central banks.
That told you. That was the giveaway?
That's the giveaway. Yeah, that's the giveaway. If you're not going to go against the central banks, you're not going against the current system. You're keeping the system, and you're going to try to tweak it or improve it. That's impossible. The issue with the entire world is the central banks. That is why they have a central bank in every single country in the world, except for 3 or 4. And all the countries that fight against a central bank in their own country go to war. U.S. takes them to war, always.
Right.
And that's just going to continue until the central banks lose power and they go bankrupt. And I'm really hoping that happens. And we move away from central banks and do not. That's why I'm hoping the central bank system collapses before they implement a central bank digital currency system, because then we have a chance. But if they enter the central bank digital currency system before they collapse, then it's going to be much more difficult for us to fight back.
Right. And speaking of this, there's a big, it was based on an article, and it's trending right now all over social media, mostly Twitter, and it's called All Wars Are Bankers' Wars. Yeah. And I really advise people to go just search that on Twitter and watch it. It's like a 45-minute clip based on an article, but the guy goes through history saying all these wars, it wasn't the conflict that started it. It's these bankers, and presidents of the past, like Andrew Jackson, fought this. They didn't want a debt-based society, right? And these guys forced interest and all that stuff on them.
And that's how the central banks...
And it's really fascinating, and you really think that's closer to the truth. Or that is the truth.
The only reason wars happen is if central banks want a war.
Yeah, exactly.
If the banks don't want the war, there's no war that will happen. No president's just starting a war on their own because they're crazy or a lunatic. That's all theater and drama that they create.
Right, 100%.
These wars all happen because they were told to go to war.
Right.
And that's just the way it's always going to continue.
And if you fight the system, like the Federal Reserve and stuff like that, if in the past history, I think Germany was
another reason to go to war.
Germany was one, who flourished and had their own.
Yep. Now Iraq recently, that's why we went to war with them, because Saddam Hussein wanted to have his own currency backed by gold. Same with Gaddafi, wanted his own currency backed by gold. Right. All gone. You cannot publicly fight against the central banks because the central banks run the world and they run all the armies. They run it all. You're not going to... You could try. I mean, all the power to those guys that try, and I think that's amazing, and that's probably why Donald Trump did not do that, because he probably wants to stay alive. Again, I don't see that change.
Good point.
The only people that can make that change is us. We have to just...
Yeah, that's going back to what we said. Until we get into the streets, the people that stop falling for this divide.
Right.
And let's go after the elites. Right. These are the guys that are
these protests, they all should be happening at these central banks. Like, shut down the central banks. If we can shut down the central banks, we take control of our country again, and we take control of our money, because he who controls the money is he who controls the world. Right. And I forget who made that quote, but that's a reality. And until we take back control of our money, we will always be slaves. And we will become more enslaved as the years go on, especially with central bank digital currencies. At that point, we lose all freedom.
That's the end game.
That's the end game, and they're heading there, and they're heading there fast. Again, that might be another reason why they go to war. They really want to implement these central bank digital currencies, and very soon. So there may be some type of an event where it could be a cyber attack on the United States, blame it on Russia. Okay, you can't access your money because we were hacked. Okay, so what do? Well, there's a safer form of money on the blockchain called a central bank digital currency. They'll play it off as safe because you can't hack it because it's on the blockchain, which in that essence is true. But the problem is safety is one thing, but now they're going to be able to play with the code and implement all these new controls on that money system, on that new digital system. So they're going to limit what you can buy. You can only travel once a year. You can only buy a certain amount of red meat. If you don't pay your taxes, we seize your account. If you may even have to spend your money within 12 months. So these are all things they're going to use with these central bank digital currencies to make your life miserable. And then they're going to get rid of cash. So now they're going to know everything you do with your money. So if you're buying things they don't like you buying, then you get the social credit score, right? And then they can make you a bad person and not get a big of a government check as everybody else. There's 100 different ways this can play out, but my point is the enslavement that we are under today is going to get much, much worse over the coming years, especially in the West.
Okay, so with all this chaos going on, what's alarming? Do you see anything alarming in the financial markets right now?
Yeah, I think we're seeing something right now in the 10-year Treasury market, 10-year U.S. Treasury market, which is one of the biggest bond markets in the world, if not the largest bond market in the world. So what we have seen is the 10-year Treasury interest rates have been skyrocketing over the last few weeks. Okay, and we're at levels now, we're at 5%, and we haven't seen the 10-year Treasury this high since 2006. Okay, so we're talking 17 years where we haven't seen interest rates on the 10-year this high. So what that means is that anybody who purchased bonds at a lower rate, now those bonds they could be buying at better interest rates today. So all those bonds that they purchased are now underwater. They're losing because of the interest. So bonds are inversely related with interest rates, okay? So if interest rates go up, bond values go down. If interest rates go down, bond values go up, which is why bonds were an amazing investment for 40 years because interest rates came down for 40. Right? Yeah. Now the last 2 years, it's actually been a disaster. 3 years, sorry. So in the last 3 years, the 10-year Treasury yield went from 0.6% to 5%. Okay, so it's an over 800% increase in yield, which means anybody owning those assets got absolutely murdered. Now the banks are the big owners of 10-year Treasuries, hedge funds, mutual fund companies, pension funds, government retirement accounts. So even individuals who own RSPs or TFSAs or 401ks in the States.
Right, exactly.
There's a good chance in your portfolio that you own these 10-year Treasury bonds. Mm-hmm. They got crushed, okay? Yeah. So now what this is causing, so the last time we saw this was 2006, the interest rates go to this level. The difference is this time it happened in a much shorter period of time. To go up 800% is unforeseeable, and it's something that's never happened before. So what is the issue now is that the banks are under extreme pressure. So what happened in 2006, the rates got to that level. Within the next 18 months, you saw many banks fail, okay? Because it causes a credit freeze because it causes the banks to not be able to operate because their funds dry up, their asset values dry up, deposits dry up. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but the point is the government... the banks cannot sustain interest rates at these levels. You will start to see banks fail. So what's going to happen here, and the central banks and the governments around the world know this, they have to come in and buy up these bonds. Because the reason the interest rates are going up is because everybody in the world is selling their U.S. treasuries. So you got Brazil selling their treasuries. China's selling massively amounts of treasuries. China's the number one holder of U.S. treasuries, and they're also the biggest seller right now. So you got Russia selling treasuries. So you got the whole world selling these U.S. treasuries all at the same time, which is causing the interest rates to skyrocket. This is the scariest part of our entire financial system, and it's always been known as the end game. When the 10-year Treasury bond market collapses, it's the end game for the entire financial system. And we are at the beginning stages of that right now. So the only way they can stop the bleeding is to come in, print
a ton of money.
Trillions.
Yeah.
To keep that rate suppressed, because who's going to buy these bonds? The rest of the world's selling them. Nobody wants them. Who wants to buy a 10-year bond that only pays 5%?
So how can they say that they're going to buy it themselves? Like
that's what happens now.
Yeah.
So the U.S., the Federal Reserve of the United States currently buys the majority of all treasuries that are for sale. So they borrow the money and then they go buy bonds.
And they go buy bonds.
It's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm so bullish on precious metals and so bearish on the U.S. dollar, because this is the way it has to be. The interest rates will go to the moon if the Fed doesn't come in and buy up these bonds. And that's just the way it is. So they're going to have no choice. And you saw it actually this morning. You saw the 10-year Treasury go from 5% to 4.91, like a 9 basis point move, which is enormous in the bond market. That means they actually went in there today and started buying up these bonds without telling us. They didn't ask for approval. They didn't tell us they were printing money, but they're doing it behind the scenes because they have to keep the system afloat. Because what happens when the bond market collapses, stocks come down with it. It's not like people are going to say, oh, I better sell my bonds. I'm going to go put my money in stocks. It's not how it works. By the bond market collapsing, people view that as risk, and they don't want to be in any asset classes because stocks traditionally don't do well when bonds are doing poorly. So that's what you're going to start to see. And then you're going to also see people continuing to pull their funds out of the banks as the banks continue to fail, because this interest rate hike that we've seen over the last few months and years is going to continue to cause banks to fail. There's just no way around it. That's exactly what happened in 2007, 2008. The interest rates went up too quick. Banks started to fail. There's a lot of other reasons as well. Giving out bad mortgages. There's a lot of reasons, but very similar. The interest rates are right where they were when the banking collapse happened in 2007, 2008. And I think we're going to see the banking collapse happen in 2023, end of 2023, or early 2024.
So soon.
Soon. You're going to see, not all of them. I mean, you're going to start to see, and again, what that will allow them to do is print more money because they're going to have to bail out these banks. So again, that's more inflation. You got the war happening, more inflation. The price of oil skyrocketing, more inflation. I mean, everything is pointing to extreme amounts of inflation. They talk about this goal of getting the inflation rates down to 2%. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. There's too much going on in the world to tighten up.
And this war ain't helping.
The war is insane. The U.S. alone is $300 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, what is it going to get to? That's just for now. I mean,
so it's almost like suicide. This timing for this war is idiotic.
It's just idiotic.
It's just insane.
It's selfish. It's all for the wrong reasons.
Okay, so let's talk about something positive that's going to come up of this, because with all this going on, what is the upside with gold and silver? Gold and silvers might have a huge upside.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I mean, I have been for quite some time, but right now, specifically with everything happening, I've never been more bullish on precious metals in the short term. I mean, everything that is positive for gold and silver is happening. Okay, so you got inflation levels at 40-year highs. Number one, check. You got a war happening in the Ukraine and in Israel.
Printing money.
Check. You got alerts in the 10-year Treasury market that, I mean, this is what everybody in the financial market is talking about right now, is this 10-year Treasury yield skyrocketing. Okay, so that is a big red flag for all other markets. So when you see that 10-year Treasury do a big move like that, all that does is say stocks are about to collapse. Okay, that's what that signals. So people
this
know
is a
this.
Big check.
Big check. Okay, stocks are under pressure. Check. Real estate under pressure. Check. Economy slowing. Check. You got, not to mention the price of gold and silver. Currently cheap, historically speaking. Silver less than its 1980 prices. Gold only 150% above its 1980 prices, okay? So it's cheap, historically speaking. These other asset classes have performed phenomenally over the last few decades. That's going to change. So you got everything in place. Because when this fear happens and people start to see their stock portfolios go down another 20 to 30%, or their bond market portfolio go down another 20, 30%, they're going to seek alternative assets. And that time is coming very, very soon. But I think the big trigger of it all, when it will just completely do a 180, is when the next bank goes down. That's when you'll see the price of gold and silver. I think that will be the bottom of gold and silver, and that will be the beginning of the new bull market in commodities.
So I want you to make a prediction right now. Michael Piccioni, the host of the Gold Awakening podcast, president of Can-Am Currency, president of soon-to-be-open Can-Am Bullion, coming soon. What are your predictions of the upside of gold and silver? Where do you think that price is going to go?
So right now, the way I look at that is,
let's look at it right now. What is gold at right now today as we speak?
It's like 1970 US, in that
1970
range. We're heading to 2000. All-time highs 2065 US. Okay, Europe actually just hit all-time highs in gold today. Okay, so
just today,
priced in euros.
Wow.
Gold hit an all-time high today. So that signals what's going on in the world. Okay.
But how far can you see it going?
Gold, I could see going to $10,000 to $20,000 an ounce. Right now, we're at let's just say $2,000. But that's not that crazy. So even if it goes to 10,000, you're talking about a 400% increase in price.
Okay.
In the 1970s, it went up 2,500%. Okay, so 400% is not that extreme. But that will be an extreme world that we live in. I'm not going to lie. $10,000 gold is not a world that's going to be fun to live in, because everything is going to go up in price, not just gold and silver. That's what I try to tell people. I mean, don't think you're going to get rich because your investment went up in gold and silver, because life will be way more expensive to live. It may be $2,000 for groceries instead of $300. Okay, maybe $5,000 for a flight to Mexico instead of $500. This is the type of inflation that we are going to enter. It may not be next year, but over time. And you can just go back to prior pricing in historically and look at today's prices. I mean, if we go through more inflation and potentially hyperinflation, I mean, it's scary. So I think gold, $10,000, silver, $1,000.
Wow.
10-to-1 ratio, which is very normal. Okay. In 1980, the ratio was 15 to 1. It got to, gold went to $800 and silver went to $50. So it was like a 15 to 16 to 1 ratio, which historically speaking, if you go back thousands of years, that's what the ratio should be based off the amount of silver being mined out of the ground versus gold. So 15 to 1 ratio is historically what we've been at. I'm thinking we get to a 10 to 1 because I think the silver demand today is much greater than it's ever been. The use cases for silver today are much greater than they've ever been. With all the technology, the electric cars and the solar panels, the shortages in silver will be greater in this decade than they've ever been in history because of the industrial demand. Now throw in the retail demand because that's going to come in super, super aggressive. So I think you're going to see a point in the next 12 to 18 months where all the physical silver in the world, all the above ground silver in the world will be gone. And people like you and me will not be able to buy. It will just be completely unavailable, unobtainable.
Right.
Okay, that's where we're headed. So silver is currently $23. I think it's going to $1,000. I think it's going to eventually go more than that. It could go to $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 an ounce. But I mean, gun to my head, by 2030, I think you're going to see anywhere between $500 silver to $3,000 an ounce silver, somewhere in that range.
Wow.
I'd probably say closer to above $1,000. So, I mean, I don't think it's a stretch. I think a 10 to 1 ratio of gold to silver makes sense. So that's why I'm so passionate about precious metals. So like, tell me one other asset. Do you think your home's going to go up 5 times in the next 5 years?
No.
Your home's not going to be worth $7 million or $5 million if it's worth $1 million today. It's just not.
Right.
It's just not, because people can't afford it. The prices of homes cannot continue to escalate.
Well, right now they're too high. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, people. It's unaffordable.
Yeah.
It's and the economy is going to slow. It's going to get worse. People are going to lose their jobs. Inflation is going to keep going higher. Look at these oil prices. The war's not going away. These oil prices are just going to skyrocket. You're going to see oil at $150 a barrel. This is coming. $200 a barrel. Exactly. What are you going to do? You're going to have to fill up your gas tank. You're going to be spending $200. How's that going to impact the economy? It's going to be a disaster. And that's a certainty. Like, war's not going away. Oil has to go up in that environment. How are people going to be able to afford the day-to-day if the price of oil is doing that? I mean, So I mean, I'm excited about silver because silver at $23, if it goes to 1,000, you're talking about 40, 50 times your money. Okay, so you put 10K away, you make $400,000, $500,000. That can save you financially. Can save you and your family financially for the inflation that is going to come and the financial calamity that's going to ensue. Because if you're just sitting in traditional assets, you're sitting in bonds, stocks, and money in the bank, and you go through this next 5 to 10 years with just those assets, I mean, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep your head above water. Very, very difficult. Wow, the only way to protect yourself from inflation is to own precious metals. You go back thousands of years, the best performing assets through all inflationary environments has always, always, always been precious metals. Always. And that is going to continue again. And we haven't seen it yet, even though we're seeing this crazy inflation, 40-year highs, turmoil in the world, war going on. Everything else is collapsing, but why is gold and silver not going up yet? It's starting. It's starting. Like I said, it's all-time highs in Europe. Right. In Venezuela, it's up 700-800%. I think in Turkey, it's up almost 100%. So in certain countries in the world, gold's performing amazing. But if you look at Canada and the U.S., it hasn't really done anything spectacular. Right. But that move's coming. And that move will come when people transition out of their traditional assets into gold and silver. And I think that'll happen once the banks start to fail, which I think will happen later this year or early 2024. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm excited, not about what's coming, but I'm excited about the potential of what the price of gold and silver will do. And I think it's something that is important because I think it will save families financially. And people really need to take onus on themselves to do their own education, learn about gold and silver, go throughout history, look at what it's done during certain time periods, look at where we're at today and where we're at in the cycle, and look at where we're at on other asset classes. So don't just buy gold stocks and bonds because your financial advisor told you to. Look at where you're at in the cycle for stocks and bonds. It's not a good spot. You're at the beginning of a really, really ugly bear market. And if you look at gold and silver, you'll realize you're not in a bubble at all. We're still 60% off all-time highs from 43 years ago in silver. Right. Gold, we're still not at all-time highs. So, I mean, we still got a long way to go in gold and silver to the upside. But stocks and bonds, I don't really get too excited about those.
But now is the time.
Now you have to do it now because
you have to do it now.
This can escalate quick. Monday morning, you could see 2 major banks go down or 1 major bank go down.
Exactly.
Then what? What's going to happen? You think you're going to be able to come into my office and buy gold and silver? No, it's going to be gone. Yeah. That morning, I'm going to, once these banks go down, the first knee-jerk reaction from all major investors in the world, get your money out of traditional assets, get your money in your possession, and buy gold and silver. So, I mean, you're going to see that happen, and it's going to be explosive.
You're seeing it now because now you're seeing people talk about it more than ever. I was watching Patrick Bet-David, who I'm a big PPD podcast, and his podcast goes into a commercial where he's promoting gold and silver to buy with. He partnered up with some company.
Yeah, I think anybody who's.
Then I watched an MMA podcast, and I see this MMA guy with another company. So I'm like, you know, it's just starting. This is the very beginning. Slowly. I think you hit it on.
Because they're going to become a point.
It's the beginning of a bull market.
It is. And you're going to see it. And you'll notice when you start hearing gold promotions on the radio every day.
Yeah, exactly.
Or on TV. We buy your gold.
Well, TD started, I started getting advertising from TD like I've never seen before. Gold
I've seen it too. I'm seeing more online ads of gold and silver than I've ever seen before. And let's talk about Costco. I know we haven't touched on that.
Oh, yeah. Costco now has it.
Big news. It's big news because it really did create a frenzy in the gold and silver market in terms of the demand for Costco customers. They were the stock sold out in like less than a day or something. Basically, they created so much demand for gold because they started selling it that all the Costco customers just started buying gold because Costco was selling it. You know, everybody just thinks everything's cheaper at Costco. I looked at the pricing. They're no cheaper than us. Their pricing was not anything enticing or exciting, but just because they promoted it and they have such a big following. I had friends telling me they tried buying on the Costco website. I'm like, wow. I mean, Why? They're like, well, I thought it was a good deal. They don't even know what a good deal is.
Yeah,
they're not
exactly,
comparing
right.
prices. But I think it's great for the gold and silver market that Costco's selling because it does
I think it's
brings
good.
brand awareness. It makes
Right.
people awake. Now somebody might say, oh, maybe I should buy gold. And then maybe they'll go online and research why they should buy. Is it a good time to buy gold? Do some research. Because once you do research, it's gonna be the most obvious thing you could possibly do in your life when it comes to investing.
And you offer what something Costco doesn't offer, which is really good, is a free consultation with you have precious metal experts like yourself that could talk to people before you buy, and this doesn't cost you anything, right?
Yeah.
It's a free consultation, and I think people need that more than ever.
They do.
Because people don't know, the general public, just like you said, they're kind of lost in this precious metal, so
they're new.
And I think it's best that you offer it a Can-Am currency and Can-Am bullion. I think it's best you sit with just like you would sit with an investor when you buy stocks, right? Just get that right advice.
It's important.
Yeah, it's very important.
It's very important
because you wouldn't know what to buy.
You have no idea. You don't know if you want gold versus silver.
Exactly.
You don't know if you should be buying government products versus private minted products.
Right.
You don't know if you should be buying coins versus rounds versus bars, big bars, small bars.
Exactly.
That's the nice thing about Can-Am. You can come in here and have a discussion with myself or another metals expert,
right,
and get those questions answered.
Yeah, exactly.
We can steer you in the right direction as best we can.
Yeah.
I mean, the other benefits is our selection is much greater. I mean, Costco's selection is not good. They run out of inventory very quick. We don't run out of inventory. We can always order it for the customer that day, get it within a week or two.
Right.
Costco's not doing that for you. They're not making orders for you. You're either buying it online or you're not.
Right.
And they limit you to one a week or something like that, one gold bar. We don't have any limitations. We educate the customer. We have a better selection. We will beat Costco pricing. So, I mean, there's really no reason to buy gold at Costco. They don't even sell silver. We didn't even touch on that, but they don't even sell silver.
Wow.
They just started with gold bars.
Gold, right.
I'm sure it's a test pilot to see how it does.
Yeah, exactly. They want to see.
And I think the bigger thing on that is I think they know what's coming. I don't think they're selling gold by it being a fluke because it's such a bizarre asset for Costco to sell. So why are they selling it? To me, I'm thinking they are very aware of where we're at in the markets, and they see the sales of gold going up,
right, and
they can predict that in the future. I think gold sales are going to go up 500% to 1,000%. And
they
I'm sure they know that
Costco
too.
Wants in on
they
it.
want in on it, and they're not stupid.
They're not missing out on anything.
No, and I'm happy they are because again, so many people reached out to me to discuss that, and I think it's great that it brings a lot of awareness to the precious metals market.
It's Can-Am versus Costco. Round one. Let's see who wins. It's a big
can't even
name.
get gold from Costco. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So come to Can-Am. It's not even. It's not even competition.
And they don't even have Royal Canadian Mint products.
Exactly. But there's and there's so much to learn. Just like anything, if you get in stocks, talk to an expert.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk to an expert before.
Talk to multiple experts. I mean, there's not a lot in
and he could recommend how to diversify your portfolio as well too. How much should I buy? Right. There's so many questions that need to be answered.
It's the same with the banks. A lot of people buy gold and silver from banks, and I'm not trying to tell them not to, but they're not going to provide you with any consultation whatsoever. Yeah. People selling you gold and silver at the banks don't know really anything about it. Mm-hmm. Okay, I've been studying the market daily for over a decade, and I know everything there is to know about precious metals, so I can answer all those questions. We can get you any type of precious metal coin, bar, round, where the banks are limited. They're only selling their own bars, TD bars. Okay, they're not selling the Valcambis. They're not selling other stuff, so they limit it. They limit to what you can buy, and a lot of the stuff is their own product. The rounds, they're their own TD rounds. Right. Exactly. They're not even selling Buffalo rounds. So there's a lot of stuff you can't buy from banks or traditional. I mean, so I think that's another advantage of.
You heard it, folks. Coming to the experts. Can-Am here.
All right, brother.
All right, we covered a lot.
Thank you.